The Seattle Mariners, the only baseball team in the Pacific Northwest. Since 1977, the Mariners have been the mainstay for baseball in Seattle. While the Mariners may be Seattle's baseball team today, they weren't the first team to call the Emerald City home. 8 years earlier, another team came to Seattle, but political impatience, an ownership group not prepared for such losses, and a stadium not built for professional baseball led to this one-year blunder. That team was the Seattle Pilots. Play the intro. This story doesn't begin in Seattle. It begins in Kansas City. In 1968, Charles Finley moved the Kansas City Athletics to Oakland. Kansas City was without a team for the first time since the 1880s. A Missouri senator wasn't going to let this happen. U.S. Senator Stuart Symington threatened to revoke MLB's antitrust exemption. Major League Baseball hastily awarded an expansion team to Kansas City, but they needed another team for the American League. And that's where Seattle came in. The newly formed Kansas City Royals and Seattle Pilots were slated to begin in the 1971 season, but that was too long for Mr. Symington and all of Kansas City, so he recycled the same threat and forced the American League to move the expansion a few years earlier in 1969. This would come back to hurt Seattle. The Royals could at least play in Municipal Stadium while Kauffman Stadium was being built. The Pilots weren't so lucky. 6 Seattle Stadium was supposed to be a temporary home until a dome could be created. Remember when I said the expansion was rushed from 1971 to 1969? 6 Seattle Stadium was supposed to be upgraded to have a capacity of 30,000, but only 17,000 were ready for opening day. The number of seats was expanded to 25,000 seats in June, but most were obstructed. It wasn't just the seats that were the problem. Photographers had to set up their cameras in the grandstands and couldn't set near the field. Water pressure was shut down after the 7th inning also. The locker rooms weren't the best either. Players couldn't shower after games due to the aforementioned water pressure. Notice how I mentioned the stadium first instead of the team. The Pilots were an expansion team expected to struggle, but how bad were they? In April, Seattle went 7-11. Better than expected, but not world beaters. In May, the Pilots went 13-13 for a 20-24 record. Still iffy, but they did pull off series wins against the Yankees and Red Sox. At the end of June, they went 14-15 for a 34-39 record. For a first-year team, the Pilots were just mediocre. Here's where the futility hits. An abysmal July, going 9-20, and an even worse August, going 6-22. Everyone soon realized they were an expansion team. In September and October combined, Seattle went a mediocre 15-17. The Pilots crashed into the Pacific with a 64-98 record, 33 games back of first place. While Seattle experienced typical expansion woes, the problems were mainly off the field. Remember when I mentioned 6 Stadium earlier? All the problems they were stuck with? Well, they all came to roost. 6 Stadium was a minor league stadium. I said it was supposed to be upgraded, but that never happened. It was supposed to be a temporary home until a stadium with a dome could be built, but construction was delayed due to political problems. So combine an expansion team that sucks with an antiquated wooden mess of a stadium not made for the big leagues, you get an ownership group bleeding money. Before the season even started, the Pilots were in trouble. Many lawsuits hampered Seattle. As players reported to spring training, they had no idea if they would be playing in Seattle or a different city. The Seattle owners sold the Pilots to a Milwaukee-based used car salesman named Alan Bud Selig, who had the intention of moving the Pilots to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Except the owners weren't on board with the idea. They blocked the move and the Pilots were stuck in Seattle. After more legal battles, Pacific Northwest Sports, the ownership group, declared bankruptcy. Only a week before opening day, the Pilots were declared bankrupt and sold to Selig. The Pilots' name was dropped. They would land in Milwaukee as the Brewers. The Milwaukee Brewers spent many years in the basement, many years coming up short. Until 1982. The Brewers made a run to the World Series. In the 1982 World Series, they were up 3-2 against the St. Louis Cardinals, but they were obliterated in Game 6 and choked a 3-1 lead in Game 7. The Brewers were so close to a World Series win, but blew it. Today, the Brewers are the Minnesota Wild of baseball, a team that is good enough to make the playoffs, but not good enough to make a real impact, or they will choke away a wildcard spot. While the Brewers are a decent-ish team on the field, off the field there appear to be problems. Rumors are swirling that team executives are targeting a move due to not being able to receive stadium upgrades. As a fan of a division rival, I hate the Brewers. I find most of their fans arrogant and I want to see them fail. But I hope the Brewers stay in Milwaukee. Major League Baseball would be worse without a team in Milwaukee. Baseball wasn't done in the Emerald City. Following the Pilots' move to Milwaukee, Seattle sued MLB for breach of contract. After a few years of legal battles, Seattle was awarded another team. The Pilots weren't the name of this team, but the Mariners. Today the Seattle Mariners are a really good team. Despite being the only team in Major League Baseball to not make a World Series, the Mariners have the potential to not only make the World Series for the first time in franchise history, but win a championship. When they eventually do so, they will avenge the Pilots and make Seattle proud. While the Pilots were a failure, they had one accomplishment. They set the seeds for two teams, the Brewers and the Mariners. The Seattle Pilots deserve some credit for bringing baseball to both Milwaukee and Seattle. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. If I get to 500 subscribers before December 27th, I'll do a Q&A for my birthday. I'll see you in the next video.